connection, I should mention that it has been laid out specifically in the 2006 environmental assessment for the refurbishment of the Bruce reactors that these steam generators would not be transported on public roads, that they would be stored in a facility on the surface until 2043. Ontario Power Generation had signed a contract with Bruce Power to build a segmentation facility to take the steam generators apart eventually, and then for easier permanent disposal. Both Bruce Power and CNSC, in those documents, stated that because the steam generators are radioactive waste, they cannot be recycled. And just one word about recycling. We hear this word recycling, which is a misnomer. In fact, the Studsvik Corporation is not in the business of recycling contaminated metal. Rather, they are in the business of contaminating recycled metal. What they do, nobody wants radioactive metal, nobody. What they do is they melt down the metal, which is contaminated, and they explain to the CNSC commissioners that they have to dissolve this, melt this with 10 parts of uncontaminated metal in order to be able to pass it off as uncontaminated. But in fact, it contains plutonium, it contains dozens of other radioactive materials. So what we're doing is we're disseminating radioactive waste materials into the scrap metal market and pretending that it's not there. This is far from being the right thing to do. This is completely irresponsible, we believe, and it's irreversible. Once you get this material into the scrap metal supply, you'll never get it out again.
So it has no specific destination, it just goes into a general supply. Anybody can buy it and use it for anything?
That's correct. Studsvik Corporation will do the initial disassembly of the steam generators, will melt down up to 90% of the volume of metal, and will then they will send it to another facility where, this is the way they explained it, where each unit of radioactively contaminated metal would be blended with 10 units of uncontaminated metal, and from that point on, there would be no indication to anybody that this metal is contaminated. Now, many international and national bodies have stated that they're opposed to this practice, including a United Nations report issued a couple of years ago. The Steel Manufacturers Association the Steel Manufacturers Association has stated that they would never willingly handle radioactively contaminated metal, and they're completely opposed to the idea of allowing this to happen. So I don't believe there's any real benefit. There's no positive public benefit at all in these shipments. The fact that the CNSC had to bend the rules because the amount of radioactivity on this shipment is 6 times the maximum amount normally allowed on a single vessel. Imagine a speed limit of 100 kilometers per hour and you have somebody going 600 kilometers per hour. And the regulatory agency says that's okay. Why should they bend the rules to allow this shipment when this shipment is both unnecessary, unwarranted?
I think there were maximum amounts of radioactivity permitted. What are you referring to?
I'm referring to the International Atomic Energy Agency has regulations for how much radioactivity is allowed on a single shipment. For ocean-going shipments, this amount is exceeded by 6 times. For inland waterways such as lakes and rivers, it's exceeded by over 60 times. The reason for this is because inland waterways are much more precious. People derive their drinking water. So actually, we have a dispute about this. The CNSC does not deny that it's over 6 times. They do deny that it's over 60 times. We think that this is, again, not defending the public interest. The reason why 60 times is the appropriate figure is because the Great Lakes is very precious. 40 million people derive their drinking water from these lakes. The reason for having a limitation on the maximum amount of radioactivity is that if there is an accident, if there is a release, let's minimize the danger. Let's keep the danger, put a cap on it. And the fact that the CNSC is willing to throw this regulation aside by making a special arrangement for no good reason strikes us as really a dereliction.
These generators.
Okay. There's a difference between nuclear goods and nuclear garbage. The CNSC talks about 50,000 shipments of radioisotopes that take place on the not on the St. Lawrence, but 50,000 shipments of radioisotopes. Well, radioisotopes are not radioactive garbage. There is a public benefit to be gained here, medical benefits to the patients, benefits to the doctors. There is no benefit to this shipment. What we're doing is we're opening the doorways to the shipment of radioactive garbage. And since we have hundreds of reactors which are becoming decrepit in North America, there's going to be an increasing traffic in this material once it starts. We're saying they should abide by their original promises to keep this stuff isolated from the environment. Don't send it anywhere. There should be no transport of radioactive garbage unless there is a very good reason on the basis of health or environmental benefits, not on the basis of financial benefits. There's the difference. Now, another thing that should be borne in mind is that with the medical isotopes, the half-life is measured in hours. So that if there was an accident involving medical isotopes, it would be dangerous. You'd have to cordon off the area. There would be an emergency. But that emergency would not last more than a few months because the material dissipates. It radioactively decays. It has a half-life of 66 hours, for example, in the case of molybdenum-99. In the case of the steam generators, the plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 years. That's 5 times longer than the age of the pyramids. So when you cordon off the area, how long do you have to wait? And there also have been studies done by competent authorities outside the nuclear establishment using the same assumptions that the CNSC has used, showing that if there was an accident in Owen Sound Harbor, it could exceed the Health Canada drinking water action levels for radioactivity in drinking water. Similarly, if there was an accident in one of the locks, it would exceed the action levels for drinking water. If there was that was only involving one steam generator. If there was an accident involving up to 4 steam generators elsewhere along the St. Lawrence near a drinking water inlet, an intake for drinking water, that could exceed the action levels. What it means is these communities would have to stop drinking the water. They'd have to find alternative sources of water. To say that this is, harmless or not going to happen, I think reminds me of the captain of the Titanic. Of course, it's very likely, and I'm the first to admit, it's very likely that this shipment would happen without incident. However, when you talk about repeated shipments, and they're already planning more shipments after this is not the only shipment. When you have repeated shipments, what you're doing